Good morning. I'm honored to be the moderator for this panel. We will have renowned speakers presenting their work. They will refer to theoretical discussions and frameworks that are relevant to service learning. Each panelist will have 15 minutes for the presentation, and towards the end, if we have some time available, we can have a short Q&A. First, Andrés Peregalli and Luz Avruj will present on solidarity, fraternity, and spirituality in promoting service learning. Andrés is the vice coordinator of the Uniservitate Global Network. He has a degree in education from the University of San Andrés, and Luz has a degree in social network analysis and management from the Bolivarian University in Chile, and she has also a university degree in education from the UMSA. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ezequiel, for the kind introduction, and I want to thank you all for being here. I'm so happy to be here with you in the 7th Service Learning Researchers meeting. Let me make some points of clarification first. Luz and I will give the presentation, but in our team we also had Maria Rosa Tapia and Candelaria Ferrara. So the four of us took on the challenge of looking at all these aspects that are the focus of service learning. But in this case, we focus on our own organization, CLAYSS. That meant a significant challenge, a powerful challenge. We feel passionate about the work we do in CLAYSS, but this also forced us to keep a certain distance in order to share the work that we do, but also to carry out this analysis looking at the conceptualization by literature, different authors and texts that are not our own creation. So we share with you all this information in the framework of this research project that we carried out. So these are important points to raise here. Later on, after you listen to our presentation, you can look at our full paper, but you can also look at the documents that CLAYSS has available to you. So this will be our roadmap, our agenda for this presentation: conceptual framework, questions, objectives, methodology, analysis, results, and some of the new questions derived from this research work. Let's talk about the conceptual framework. The Latin American Service Learning Center, CLAYSS, has been working for more than 20 years in Argentina and in the region. So we took service learning as the field in the conceptual frameworks. Here you see service learning as a component, which is not created by CLAYSS, but it is given a new meaning by CLAYSS. We are going to focus on specific concepts, and this is an exploratory type of research, descriptive research. We focus on solidarity, fraternity, spirituality, and networks. These are not CLAYSS's creation, but we gave new meaning to these components. And all this is looked at from the point of view of educational management. This topic has been developed for many years, but we can characterize this component as creating the necessary conditions for things to happen, as Bernardo Blechman says. But not just to have anything happening. We want to achieve a mission, some specific objectives. So this research project focuses on how CLAYSS, over the years, from a management standpoint, has given new meaning to these concepts of solidarity, fraternity, spirituality, and networks through service learning. Why? Because the field of education, administration, or management tells us what an institution is and knows. And this is the other conceptual component that we don't talk too much about. Sometimes we talk about doing as part of management, but we don't pay attention to the fact that doing speaks to the identity, to the being, to knowledge. This may sound like a tongue twister right now, but this is quite important because by doing, we are being in a certain way and we are building knowledge, as Alejandra and Daniel said, that needs to be analyzed, needs to be considered as a problem and also guides the work that we do. So what are the guiding questions? Can service learning as a philosophical approach permeate institutional management? Can solidarity, fraternity, spirituality, and networks contribute to institutional management in promoting service learning? I usually talk about contribution and attribution as different things when I teach. These are not just different words. The concepts that we focus on in our research contribute to a certain type of management and a certain identity, but there are other actions, other lines of work that also contribute and that we are not looking at here. So here we just focus on these concepts in relation to our mission, our identity in management. So our goal here is to look at our own center to see how CLAYSS, the Latin American Service Learning Center, looks at the different program areas and these specific concepts of spirituality, fraternity, solidarity, and networks, to see how it attaches a new meaning to those concepts and what new components this can bring. Many of you will hear about concepts that have been used for many years, but with CLAYSS and with Uniservitate, we realize that today, in 2025, these concepts may be novel, they may be new, just as the concept of solidarity from a horizontal standpoint. So how this can be managed from our organization. What is the methodology that we used? This was a case study analyzing qualitative and quantitative data. We also looked at some foundational concepts. We looked at institutional literature. We also hope to have peer review work and to continue systematizing these results. We use institutional papers, also other documents from the organization, testimonials, and experiences. So here we have also epistemological surveillance as part of this work as researchers. So now I'll give the floor to Lu so that she will share with you the results and the conclusions. As Andrés was saying, CLAYSS was our case study in order to explore this relationship between the basic elements of service learning and management. So, along those lines, we look at the different areas of work within CLAYSS. This came out of an institutional brochure that CLAYSS has describing the different areas of work. So we looked at each area, we analyzed them in depth, and then we looked at the basic concepts that CLAYSS works on. One has to do with the difference between vertical and traditional solidarity, as you can see here. This is taken from a CLAYSS publication that was authored by Brady, and this is constantly used in CLAYSS. So here we have vertical solidarity versus horizontal solidarity. In horizontal solidarity, both parties have something to contribute to. We have also looked at the concept of fraternity. Why? Because CLAYSS establishes relationships inside and outside the organization on the basis of trust, with collaboration. And we also looked at Rovere and Tamargo, bringing together different stakeholders with shared objectives, negotiating in case of a conflict. And we also looked at reciprocity ties as the basis for social change. All these on the basis of mutual recognition. We start not necessarily from the point of agreement, but rather from the point of recognizing other person's humanity. Then we looked at spirituality and transcendence. CLAYSS promotes experiencing and developing the spiritual dimension as part of human beings. We are not indicating in which way spirituality has to be exercised, but we look for spirituality that looks for transcendence through service. Understanding and all parties involved are relevant and they can be enriched. And finally, networks creation. We looked at this idea posed by Ehrlichman that networks can address large problems in a way that no other organization can do by itself. Once again, we focus on ties, on bonds, the fact that we can establish a certain mesh by establishing these bonds in order to sustain long-term strategies. So we are not just talking about all these components, fraternity, solidarity, from the point of view of being good, because we need to be good, but also because this is strategically important, it makes sense, and it gives continuity to the impact that we may create. So having said all this, let me go back to what Nieves said initially. The definition of service learning. Nieves said if we have youth involved, if we have a horizontal relationship with the community, and we have the curriculum content, then it is service learning. In order to move on towards the end of this presentation, because we are running out of time, let's look at the results. All this management, knowledge creation produced by the organization from a conceptual standpoint, because here we are talking about that main theme, theoretical concepts. So we add to the term service learning solidarity as horizontal solidarity, fraternity from the point of view of bonding and experiences, spirituality conceived as part of the integral development of a person, and networks as a support structure and a means of expansion. When analyzing these areas of work of the organization, we saw that research contributes to building, systematizing, and transferring knowledge, training, consultancy and publications contribute to disseminating knowledge, transferring and updating knowledge, and the support and the networks contribute to experience, support, and continuity. So, here we are trying to present the results of research work that results from a certain action from doing, and there will be other questions that will remain open, but based on the theoretical framework that we presented, what an institution does speaks to what it is and what it knows. So here we see the interconnection of different terms that acquire a new meaning through service learning. concepts that get a certain definition and are connected with different program areas or work areas. So there is a message to be conveyed, and the organization can also learn with others from others. So now, these are some new questions that derive from this research work. We need to go back to the findings of this research work and continue looking at building knowledge from experience and dialogue between both knowledge fields. We have to continue exploring the theory of change, and we also need to consider what can be created anew. The theory of change supports institutional management and its being as an expression of organizational identity, and we also need to describe the tensions and dilemmas that the field of management in civil society experiences in some complex contexts. So knowledge is built and shared with others inside the organization, but also outside the organization. So that would be all. Thank you, and I wish you a good meeting.
Muchas gracias, Andrés y Luz. Y ahora le vamos a dar la palabra a Maristela.
Now, we will listen to the presentation by Maristela do Nascimento Rocha, who is going to talk about service learning for critical integral education, a framework. And
good morning, everyone. Yes. You received a model on a paper you used for my presentation later. Don't look at it yet, because it will be the final part. So I'm Maristela, I'm Brazilian, and I am working in Belgium at the KU Leuven, the Catholic University of Leuven. And I'm going to present you a model for integral education based on service learning. I actually received the question from my coordinator. They read the text from CLAYSS, and they say, oh, CLAYSS is all the time saying that service learning is about integral education. What do they mean? There is no further explanation about that. So I received the text to do this research, and I ended up reviewing the literature on integral education and in service learning, and I did a kind of like new framework about this research. So that's what I'm going to present you. And I mentioned that I'm Brazilian and I'm living in Belgium, also Belgium, because this is important for this research, because it's about translation. Like when you're working here in Latin America or in Africa or in wherever you're working, we tend to be very dogmatic to our culture. Everything looks very nice. But when you need to defend it to other people who think differently, and especially with people who have more power than you, which is the case of European frameworks, that they are dominating the literature, you will have a lot of trouble explaining what you mean. Like they showed that the most of the research is based on practice, so most of the research is not theoretical. So when we go to dialogue with them, they are much more on the abstract side, and we have problem translating what we mean. So it's a start, and I also invite you to join me if you have any idea in publishing something together. So I will start. I already did this introduction, so I will go. When you go to the literature on integral education only, you find that there is a tendency now, even with frameworks from India, from many places of the world, they are trying to bring education to a more emotional, intellectual, physical, moral. So we trying to develop human beings as a whole, a holistic human beings. It's not about service learning. It's a separate research literature. And then when you go to service learning literature, you have a lot of practices, and they're saying, yeah, we're also developing people holistically, but you don't have a further explanation about what it means. So I went to research each of those frameworks, and integral education, they are coming much more from integral theory. I don't know if you heard about it, but this is a theory that's being applied in many areas, not only education. It's being applied in business, in any area you can imagine. And it's a man from the United States who created this integral framework. And it's useful in the sense that it brings all dimensions of reality. So the first dimension, I dimension, is the subjective dimension when you look to your own experiences, your thoughts, and your emotions. But then you have the objective dimension, which is your relationship with the world. So you have the material, you have the objects you deal with, you have your behavior. We have the we dimension, the intersubjective dimension, so how we relate to each other, the shared values, the meanings, our cultures. And you have the its dimension, which is the interobjective, the relationship between different systems, the networks we have, technology. So you have these 4 dimensions, and when you use this to understand your practice, you will not have the tendency to be dogmatic and thinking only on one perspective of reality. You can have this more expansive framework. Okay, then when this framework is applied to integral education, to the educational field, it looks like that. So if you go to the I dimension, you have not only the intellectual part of your body, but you also have a body that feels, you have also reflections, you have emotions, you have experiences, so all the whole being of a person, it's included in this dimension. And then when you go to the it dimension, you have skills, practice, activities, everything that you do in a classroom or in a university classroom, you include in this dimension, and the knowledge learned as well. Then we have the we dimension. Is anyone controlling the time? Because, yeah, okay. We dimension, which is the interaction between people, so how we connect to each other, the perspectives we share, ethics. And we have the its dimension, which is the ecological, social, so how we relate globally to each other. So this is how it is being applied in integral education. That's the most tendency, the last tendency now. And then I went to look at service learning. So before I go to service learning, I want to say, if you just look at the practices you have and you try to fit in this framework, you can fit. You just say, okay, I can justify now that service learning is integral education. Fine. You can find, like when you go to the community, you have this more somatic dimension of learning. You're not sitting all the time. When you go to the community, you have this ecological, social dimension. You can gain social responsibility. So, okay, we are fine with this. But then, my experience in Europe and also in other parts of the world show me that you have service learning and service learnings. Like you have service learning even being applied to companies and to create products to improve the company's interest. Because when you go to other communities or other cultures, you don't have this concept of community like you have here. So a community can be a group of entrepreneurs. So you need to protect the base of service learning, especially in the Latin American way of thinking about it. Otherwise, it's going to be co-opted and be used for other purposes. So that's why I think that actually we shouldn't fit service learning into this framework, but we should create another framework based on the way of thinking from the South. So why do I write here solidarity learning? Because I'm trying to bring the frameworks from the South to fit in this integral education framework. When you read the service learning literature in English, you go to that other direction, and the social justice and transformative aspect of service learning is going to be marginalized, and the tendency is to increase that. So I want to protect our knowledge that we actually, maybe you don't know, but solidarity learning, this term didn't exist before, or service learning didn't exist before. It is a term invented by dominant countries, but we had this in the South or in Africa, all the dominated countries, we had this practice already without the term. So when we look to the practice already, we can see knowledge that they don't have there, and the main thing that I wanted to call attention is the concepts we have in our practice are already integral. That's why we don't have the need to define integral education, because you have solidarity, dignity, humanization, you have conscientization. All those those concepts do not fit in only I dimension, we dimension, it dimension. When you go to this framework, it's still very individualistic in the sense that you have the I, how the I relates to the other, and how we relate to each other, and then to the system, but it's still a group of individuals. So I tried to base myself on Mori's framework. She's Brazilian, inspired by Paulo Freire, and created a critical integral framework. It's an exploration. How much time? Sorry. Okay, thank you. It's an exploration. I still want to build further on it, and it is the framework that you have on your hands. And I tried to actually bring the concepts to this dimension. So I kept the I, it dimension, but when you have, for instance, critical consciousness, you cannot have it only on the I. So it is on the person, but it's also in relation to all the society and all the critical thinking that you need to have about it. You cannot be on your own without having the experience that's going to the it dimension, for instance. So you have in the I dimension a reflection on possibilities, healing, personal and collective wounds, shared humanity and belonging, and the it dimension embodied engagement with inequality, epistemologies of the South and the North. So this is a point that we need to start bringing to the conversation, because when we apply service learning, we are using curricula that are not decolonized. So what are the effects of that? We have community engagement here, we have embodied self-awareness and practice. They're all concepts that you cannot fit only in one of those dimensions. They are necessarily connected to each other. The we dimension, dialogue, mutual human dignity, cultural humility. So all this, and educational systems, global data justice, this is also going, like I'm saying things that you probably you don't know all of them, but we can discuss later. But they are trying to bring actually the thinking from the South that's not only about the here and now, but also about the past, what happened in the past, and what were the effects, and how are they still working right now. So the colonialism that happened, the mindset of people, and everything that's still here, based on all these power relationships between countries. So this we can discuss further, and if you have any idea, you can note and bring it to me. But then I will apply the framework to a case study in Belgium of the village of Doel. So this is a village that was suffering actually from port expansion. So the port needed to expand for economic reasons, and the people from this village had to leave for the building of this port. So this is from the 70s already, like this, and the people were fighting to keep living in this village. So a service learning project was created in 2015 at the KU Leuven to contribute with the fighting of these villagers. So many of them had left already. It was the village was actually a ghost village, and these students came to try to do something about it. They are students of architecture, and they wanted to redesign the places and make it more livable, and also try to dialogue with government and policies, and try to bring everything together, everyone together, to discuss the future of this village. And this project contributed to, actually, in the end, the government decided not to destroy the village anymore, and the people could come back and live there. So it took like 30 years in total, their fight, and the service learning project came in the last 10 years. And it really contributed by bringing artists and journalists there. And so this is, like, in summary, the case. When you apply the framework to this case, you see that they will have, like, the students were very authentic, they developed humility, they had critical consciousness. Only look at the white for now, not the yellow. They could interact with the community in a horizontal basis, develop empathy, they developed social responsibility, they could understand, they took the problem of the community really to themselves, they could really see that the economy was influencing all these happenings there. But then, when you use the framework in all its dimensions, you see that there is one part of this, the problem there, that was not being considered, because the vision was still too much focused on the community and on the students of the university. If you pay attention to the reality there, you have lots of immigrants living around that port. And what happened is that when these houses were being emptied, some of those immigrants could then afford, because those houses were cheaper afterwards, and they could live there. And what happened is actually, some were also even living on the streets. And the community members and even the students, you can see interviews of that, they say, there is a lot of vandalism happening here, a lot we have to protect. So they couldn't actually see the more intergenerational dimension of the problem, which is like we have those immigrants coming here, but actually they created an integral education experience that was integral in that community, but there was still some people being excluded and not being considered as even maybe contributing to the local informal economy of that region. So my point with this framework is it will call you attention even, wherever you are doing your project, to not only focus on the well-being and the growth of the students participating in the project, but to see it systemically. That's why the 4 dimensions help here, and intergenerationally. So considering gender, race, all the exclusionary mechanisms that were created during colonization, they should be taken into account. The hierarchies within the cities, and in this case, thank you. This case, it was a very beautiful project, but my view from the south didn't allow me to point to that. In this, the students grew emotionally, intellectually, all very nice, but then in the end, they will be the ones who will have the jobs better jobs because they have this experience, and the people from the place will continue around that place will continue in the same situation. And I guess that also here it can happen, and I would like to just create some framework that really protects all dimensions and do not keep excluding other cultures or even other religions. So thank you very much, and that's it, I think. And I really mean, if there is anyone who wants to contribute in advancing this framework, you can send me an email and we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maristela.
Right now, we will give the floor to Daniela Gargantini, who has a PhD in Education Sciences from the University of Barcelona. She has a PhD degree in architecture. She is a teacher and researcher at the Catholic University of Córdoba. They are helping me with her CV, and she is the regional coordinator of the University Social Responsibility Network. And she has done this research together with Arantzazu, Martínez, Odría, and Miquel Martínez, and Cristian Núñez Durán and María Insulza. She is going to talk about approaches to the notion of spirituality for cultivating spirituality in service learning projects. Thank you for this introduction and for allowing me to share some progress in this research work. Today, I'm going to present some progress made with other members, Arantzazu, Miquel, Cristian, Miquel Martínez from the University of Barcelona, and 2 theologians, Cristian Núñez Durán and María Insulza from the Catholic University of Chile. So I'm going to present the progress of this collective research project. I come from Argentina, from the Catholic University in the province of Córdoba. So if you have any questions or complaints, you can address them to my colleagues. I just have to share with you the progress made. So let me tell you a little bit about the origin of this research paper. As a team, here we have some advanced production derived from the project within the framework of the Uniservitate global program that provides support in different hubs around the world to research projects. In our case, we will refer to mapping and a methodological proposal for following up the development of the spiritual dimension in implementation of service learning projects at the university level. So, what are the objectives of our research? First, we want to come up with an approach to different conceptualizations implicit in the understanding of the spiritual dimension. As I will explain later, we have not found a consensus-based definition for spirituality. Another objective is to identify the dimensions that make up this dimension. So, we will start from a shared notion of spirituality, a preliminary definition. So, with these theoretical approaches, we will try to develop preliminarily test a methodology in different institutions in Latin America and in Spain specifically. So we would like to try a methodology that could help us see the level of promotion of the dimension of spirituality in the development of service learning projects in Ibero-American universities. Here, we do not only seek to provide technical training, but also to make a contribution, a bigger contribution, to integral education. So from that point of view, we believe that together with the biological and social dimensions, the spiritual dimension is an anthropological dimension inherent to human beings that is closely related to the search for meaning and the purpose of life. So that is why it is so important for us to go deeper in these searches. What is the methodology that we applied? We produce a literature register with index and non-index sources and international and global repositories that focus on spirituality in different fields. We also try to look at their connection with service learning work. We also run two supplementary literature searches looking at spirituality from the perspective of psychology. Psychology has provided some interesting inputs for the understanding of spirituality, and also we try to approach it from a Latin American theological perspective. In the frameworks promoted by Uniservitate with CLAYSS support, there is a lot of Latin America information that could allow us to see how the Latin American theology field had contributed to defining the dimension of spirituality. We also looked at previous research papers produced in earlier stages of the Uniservitate program. The Uniservitate provided small research grants to different researchers. That is how we got in touch with our colleagues from Chile. And all this information was supplemented with qualitative contributions through saturation interviews with experts from Latin America and from Europe, asking them about the spiritual dimension in higher education. These were our key informants that enabled us to have to come closer to a semi-finished model for defining spirituality. Of course, there is always room for improvement. What are the results so far? We have divided this into three main areas. First, spirituality as an essential component of human beings. Here we look at the contributions of phenomenology and also the an anthropological perspective. In terms of phenomenology, we have found information that allows us to affirm that human beings are open and receptive. They can transcend themselves. Therefore, this dimension that we are trying to define in order to operationalize it in our projects is essential to the individual. This is not something attached, but something that is inherent to human beings. There is a difference between spirituality and the material nature of human beings. This is linked to the development of intellectual, sensitive, and volitive abilities. So we see a human being as a being with spiritual capacity. So this intrinsic capability of human beings is also associated to the individual's ability to relate to others and to open themselves to others and to ourselves. The self-knowledge, the ability to relate to oneself, the ability to relate and to open to others, also to relate and to open to the environment, the context, and also to transcendence. Transcendence not necessarily linked to confessionality or religiosity, but rather as a condition, a primary condition to develop a religious conscience. All these abilities to relate and to open to oneself and to others and to the environment and to transcendence give purpose or meaning to a person's life. So it seems that they are related to the cultivation of these abilities to relate and to open to others and to oneself. The second area of results have to do with spirituality as a teachable ability in human beings. Since this is an ability, we also look at this dimension as prone to cultivation, something that can be teachable, taught. So we see cultivating spirituality as a need and as an urgency in the framework of the promotion of integral education. The third area of results has to do with relations and also the differentiation between different notions, such as spirituality, religiosity, and confessionality. They are interrelated, but they are not equivalent notions. Spirituality means transcending the limits of the formal religious practice, looking for meaning, for purpose, and also for a connection with oneself, with others, with environment. But spirituality does not necessarily rely on adhering to a dogma or to a religious institution. Spirituality is not necessarily the same as religiosity or confessionality, so that the spiritual condition is necessary in order to develop religiosity and to adhere to confessionality. So, for us, spirituality is an ability that can be taught. Religiosity is the relationship between myself and a transcendent fundamental element, a gift, and confessionality is adherent to a specific religious confession. These are interesting aspects because now we can consider a potential methodology to cultivate the spiritual dimension in our students. In order to do that, we need to have clarity of our objectives and the aspects that we want to cultivate from the notion of spirituality. What are some of the conclusions that we have drawn so far? We have not identified in scientific literature a consolidated research line contributing to spirituality and its impact on integral education. So this is a field where we can do more work, so we encourage other colleagues to pursue this kind of research studies. We also identify that there is no agreement with regard to the understanding of spirituality, and without an agreed-on definition or without a profound conceptualization, it is difficult to determine indicators and conditions for promoting spirituality. When we look at the conditions and indicators in the literature, we see vague and diffuse information, and they are not related to a sound definition. So the findings in this research allowed us to move towards contributing to a broad notion of spirituality. So all these conclusions are useful inputs to continue working to determine the external conditions that are necessary to cultivate spirituality. So for the next year, we want to move forward with the design and the pilot test of measurement tool that is applicable to the institutional level with students, faculty, and graduates. We are now inviting you all to attend the e-poster session, because there we are going to share with you our analysis of the conditions that are necessary to cultivate these components of the spiritual dimension. If you want to learn more, or if you want to contribute, you can come to our session. Hopefully, for the next few researchers' meetings, we will have a tool developed, a methodology already tested. Initially, in Ibero-American institutions, we don't dare to transfer it to other contexts, but we want to make sure that we fully test that methodology in Ibero-American institutions, and this can also be a good test of the conceptual framework. So thank you, and I invite you to contribute to our work. Thank you.